The date is April 22nd, 2026. Houston is already warm at 7 in the morning, humidity rising off the bayou. The sun still low enough to blind eastbound drivers on Interstate 45. On the feeder road at Woodridge Drive, a silver Nissan Altima has just pulled to the shoulder behind a white Chevrolet Tahoe with federal exempt plates. Inside the Tahoe are two officers from Enforcement and Removal Operations out of the Houston field office, which sits in a squat brown building on Smith Street downtown. The lead officer is Deputy Field Office Director Marcus Halden, 41, a 15-year veteran who transferred from El Paso in 2023. The second is Kevin Ruiz, 29, 3 years on the job, still inside his probationary evaluation window for a promotion he expects in June. They are not on a random patrol. The stop is what the agency calls targeted enforcement, and the target has a name, a photograph, and a case file thicker than a paperback novel. His name is Oscar Alvarado Reyes. He is 34 years old. He crossed the Rio Grande near Eagle Pass in 2011, was removed once in 2014, re-entered within 8 months, and has lived in the Gulfton neighborhood of southwest Houston ever since. He works nights at a warehouse off Bissonnette Street, driving a forklift for $19.40 an hour. He has 2 U.S. citizen daughters, ages 6 and 9. He also has a 2019 misdemeanor for driving while intoxicated and, according to the ICE detainer paperwork issued the previous Friday, an outstanding administrative warrant of removal under Section 241A-5 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, reinstatement of a prior deportation order. That warrant is administrative, not judicial. It authorizes ICE to arrest him. It does not authorize them to enter a home without consent, and it does not carry the same weight as a signed criminal warrant from a federal magistrate. Which is why Halden and Ruiz are on a feeder road at 7:14 a.m. instead of at the front door of Alvarado Reyes's apartment on Rampart Street. They had been sitting on the block since 6:30. They watched him kiss his older daughter goodbye at the curb. They followed him for 4 miles. The plan, according to the pre-operation briefing memo later obtained by the Houston Chronicle, was straightforward. Wait for him to leave the residential area. Activate the Tahoe's grille lights. Approach on both sides. Announce federal identity. Remove him from the vehicle. Transport him to the Montgomery Processing Center in Conroe, 40 miles north, where a bed was already assigned. Simple plans have a way of thinning out the moment they meet a real person. The grille lights activate at 7:13:47. Alvarado Reyes signals, slows, and pulls to the shoulder without hesitation. The dashcam footage shows him placing both hands on top of the steering wheel. Halden approaches the driver's side. Ruiz approaches the passenger side. What happens in the next 83 seconds is the entire case. Halden's account, given to the Office of Professional Responsibility 3 days later, describes a compliant subject who suddenly reaches toward the center console. Ruiz's account, given the same day, describes the driver turning the ignition and putting the car in drive. The bystander video, filmed from a Shell station across the intersection by a 22-year-old rideshare driver named Denise Okafor, shows something different. It shows Alvarado Reyes with his hands visible for roughly 70 seconds. It shows Halden's weapon drawn early in the encounter, angled downward. It shows the driver's window rolled halfway. It does not show, from that distance, what happens inside the car in the final 6 seconds before the shot. The shot itself is not disputed. 1 round. A .40 caliber Smith & Wesson service pistol. Entry through the upper left chest. Alvarado Reyes is pronounced dead at Memorial Hermann Southwest at 8:02 a.m. A man drives to work. 51 minutes later, he is on a gurney. Houston police arrive at 7:19. The Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences takes the body at 9:40. By noon, 3 separate reviews have opened: an internal ICE Office of Professional Responsibility investigation, a Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General inquiry, and a Harris County District Attorney's Civil Rights Division case file numbered CRD-2026-0114. By 4 p.m., ICE Director Caleb Whitfield issues a 2-sentence statement calling the shooting a lawful use of force in a dynamic enforcement encounter. By 6 p.m., the Mexican consulate on St. Emmanuel Street has formally requested access to the body, the vehicle, and both officers' body-worn camera footage. That last request produces the first real problem. The body-worn cameras were not on. ICE policy, updated in October 2024 under Directive 11024.1, requires body-worn camera activation prior to any planned enforcement action involving anticipated contact with the subject. The directive lists targeted vehicle stops explicitly. Both Halden and Ruiz were issued Axon Body 3 cameras at the start of their shift. Neither camera recorded any footage from the stop. Halden's device logs an activation attempt at 7:14:02 and a failure code indicating a depleted battery. Ruiz's device shows no activation attempt at all. The obvious question is whether that was deliberate. Investigators have not answered it publicly. What they have said in a preliminary filing on May 6th is that the failure rate for Axon Body 3 units in the Houston field office during the first quarter of 2026 was 11.3%, nearly 3 times the national ICE average of 3.9%. Somebody in Houston was not charging the cameras. Whether that somebody is a supervisor, a quartermaster, or the officers themselves is what the Inspector General is now trying to determine. The Tahoe's dash cam, at least, was working. But it is mounted forward, pointed down the feeder road. It captures the Altima from behind at a shallow angle. It records audio through the Tahoe's cabin microphone, which means the officers' voices are clear, and Alvarado Reyes's voice is muffled by 2 panes of glass and 30 feet of Texas air. On the recording, Halden can be heard saying, "Federal officers step out of the vehicle," twice. Then, "Hands, hands, hands." Then a pause of roughly 4 seconds. Then the shot. What the dash cam does not capture is the answer to the single question that matters. Did Alvarado Reyes reach for something, start the car, or do nothing at all? The Okafor video, uploaded to Instagram at 8:47 a.m., and viewed 14 million times in its first 48 hours, becomes the counter-narrative. It is grainy. It is filmed through the windshield of a Toyota Corolla, but it shows enough to make the agency's initial statement, a lawful use of force in a dynamic enforcement encounter, look, at minimum, premature. Gulfton organizes fast. By April 24th, a vigil at the intersection draws roughly 800 people. By April 26th, attorney Isabel Marin of the Texas Civil Rights Project has filed a federal tort claim on behalf of the Alvarado Reyes family, seeking $12 million in damages under the Federal Tort Claims Act. By April 29th, the Mexican Foreign Ministry has sent a diplomatic note to the State Department requesting a joint binational investigation citing the 1963 Vienna Convention on Consular Relations. The State Department acknowledges receipt. It does not agree to the joint investigation. Inside ICE, the operational review moves on a parallel track. Deputy Director Renata Kwan, based at headquarters in Washington, orders a full audit of all targeted vehicle stops conducted by the Houston field office since January 1, 2026. The audit covers 147 stops. Of those, 41 resulted in arrests. 12 involved drawn firearms. This one, involved discharge. The audit is not made public. A summary leaks to Reuters on May 18th. The leaked summary contains a detail that reframes the entire incident. In the 6 months before the shooting, Halden had been the subject of 2 internal complaints for what supervisors described as premature weapon presentation during vehicle stops. Both complaints were closed without discipline. Both were closed by the same supervisor, Assistant Field Office Director Trent Bowman, who had recommended Halden for the deputy director role in 2024. Bowman is now on administrative leave. His attorney declines to comment. That is the rot underneath the single second when a trigger got pulled. Not one officer's decision on one morning. A paperwork chain that let a pattern become a habit. The Federal Review announced on May 11th goes broader than the shooting. Homeland Security Secretary Alicia Verano orders a nationwide reassessment of use of force protocols during ICE vehicle stops, the first such review since 2019. Former U.S. Attorney Damian Cross leads it, staffed by 17 personnel drawn from the Inspector General's office, the Civil Rights and Civil Liberties Division, and an outside contractor, the Police Executive Research Forum. The mandate is a policy revision by December 15, 2026. The budget is $4.3 million. You might wonder why a single shooting triggers a nationwide review when other ICE fatalities have not. The answer is the video, the diplomatic pressure from Mexico City, and the number 11.3. That camera failure rate in Houston, which told auditors the agency's own accountability tools were not working as designed. When a federal agency cannot produce footage of its own enforcement actions, a review is the only move left. The Alvarado Reyes family holds a funeral on April 30th at St. Luke the Evangelist Catholic Church on Sherwood Forest Street. His 2 daughters, Camilla and Sofia, sit in the front pew with their mother, Maria del Carmen Reyes, a lawful permanent resident. The older daughter, Sofia, wears her school uniform because she went to school that morning and came directly to the church. The younger one holds a small paper crown she made in 1st grade for her father's birthday, which would have been May 8th. Maria del Carmen Reyes speaks for 90 seconds at the end of the Mass. She does not raise her voice. She says her husband called her every night from the warehouse during his lunch break at 11 p.m. She says he had recently started saving for a used pickup because the Altima's transmission was slipping. She says she is not angry at the 2 officers. She is angry at the system that told them what to do and then told them how to describe it afterward. The apartment on Rampart Street has sat half-packed since the shooting. Maria del Carmen has been advised by counsel not to move because the tort claim requires the residents of record to stay stable through the discovery phase. So the couch stays where it is. The forklift certification card, laminated, still hangs on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a strawberry. Sophia's school placed her with a bilingual counselor on May 4th. The counselor's notes, obtained with parental consent by Maureen's office and referenced in the July 2nd filing, describe a child who draws the same picture in every session: a silver car, a white truck behind it, and a sun that is not yet fully up. Something needs saying plainly here. The officer who fired that morning may have made a defensible, split-second decision under his training, and that does not make the outcome acceptable. Training that produces this outcome at this rate with these cameras off, that is what the story is, not the trigger pull. The Harris County District Attorney presents the case to a grand jury on June 3rd. The grand jury deliberates for 4 days. On June 7th, they decline to indict Officer Halden on state charges, citing insufficient evidence to overcome the reasonable officer standard under Texas Penal Code Section 9.51. The federal civil rights investigation remains open. The Justice Department has not indicated whether it will pursue charges under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. Historically, Such charges are filed in fewer than 2% of federal officer-involved shootings. Halden returns to administrative duties on June 12th. He cannot carry a firearm or conduct field operations while the federal review is pending. Ruiz has been reassigned to the Montgomery Processing Center, where he now processes intake paperwork for detainees arriving from other field operations. Neither officer has spoken publicly. The Montgomery Processing Center is worth naming because it is where Alvarado Reyes was supposed to arrive that morning. It is a 1,000-bed detention facility in Conroe, operated by the GEO Group under a $58 million annual ICE contract. On the day of the shooting, its population stood at 942. Bed 617 on the second floor of the men's dormitory was assigned to Alvarado Reyes at 6:14 a.m., 47 minutes before he pulled onto the feeder road. It stayed empty until 11:40 a.m., when it was reassigned to a 28-year-old Honduran national picked up in a separate operation in Pasadena. That is how enforcement logistics work. A bed is a slot. A slot gets filled. The paperwork moves forward regardless of who occupies the space. The federal review is now 3 months in. Preliminary recommendations circulated internally on July 1st include 4 proposals. First, mandatory pre-shift camera checks with supervisor sign-off. Second, a ban on targeted vehicle stops on limited access highways and feeder roads, restricting them to lower speed environments where subjects can be approached from a stopped position with less ambiguity. Third, a required 2-officer verbal confirmation before weapon presentation on a compliant subject. Fourth, real-time audio streaming from body-worn cameras to a supervisor's console during any planned enforcement action. None of these proposals will bring back Oscar Alvarado Reyes. They are not designed to. They are designed to reduce the probability of the next one. Whether they will is a question the December 15th policy revision will begin to answer. And the answer will not be visible for years, and the measurement will be in shootings that did not happen, which is the hardest statistic in law enforcement to prove. Attorney Isabel Marin files a supplemental brief on July 2nd, adding the Department of Homeland Security as a defendant and raising the damages sought to $18 million. Her brief includes the audit summary, the Okafor video, the 2 prior complaints against Halden, and a sworn statement from a former ICE trainer describing the Houston field office as the most aggressive vehicle stop culture in the southern region. The trainer, identified in the filing only as a former supervisory special agent with 19 years of service, describes a briefing culture in which junior officers were told to treat every targeted stop as a potential flight scenario, regardless of the subject's compliance history. He says the phrase used in one 2025 training session was, "Assume the door is a weapon." That phrase does not appear in any official ICE curriculum document. Marine has requested the training logs. ICE has not produced them. The Mexican consulate has now interviewed 16 witnesses independently. The consulate's report, delivered to the State Department on June 30th, concludes that the shooting does not meet the proportionality standard under international norms governing law enforcement use of lethal force. The State Department has not responded publicly. The consulate has requested a meeting for July 15th. Back on the feeder road at Woodridge Drive, there is a small memorial against the guardrail. Someone laid a laminated photograph of Alvarado Reyes with his 2 daughters. Someone else wrote a plastic rosary. A city works crew removed a pile of flowers on May 12th and left the photograph. On July 6th, the photograph was still there. Go back to 7:14 a.m. on April 22nd. The Altima on the shoulder. The Tahoe's grille lights. The 2 officers walking up from behind. In the 90 seconds that follow, A man dies. A family comes apart. A federal agency opens itself to a review it did not want, and a diplomatic file opens between two governments that share 1,954 miles of border. All of it flows from the space between two accounts of what a driver did with his hands. The dash cam does not answer it. The bystander video does not answer it. The body cameras were off. Which means the answer, if there is one, exists only in the memories of two ICE officers and in the silence of a man who cannot speak. That is where the case rests tonight. A grand jury has declined to indict. A federal review is underway. A family is deciding what to do about the older daughter who has stopped speaking at school. And in a warehouse off Bissonnette Street, a forklift sits idle on the third shift, its keys still hanging on the hook next to a punch card that was never punched out.